Okay, this is House Education, Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. I've been listening to so many podcasts, looking back at COVID, I keep wanting to say 2020. We are continuing our discussion on language for a strike all amendment on H.454. Looking through stuff here. I think we will return to our discussion about that language. Maybe we'll go through the class size language, maybe just the end of it first, under the failure to comply with EQS state board action. Saying that that's new for us to look at. And if you share your screen, that would be helpful.
This is third document.
I'm sorry.
It's the third document down. Class size language draft 2.1.
2.1. Yep.
Okay.
And just for the committee, we've been working in bits and pieces. We'll knit them all together, full sort of package on the table tomorrow.
Good morning, Beth. Beth St. James, Legislative Council of last year. I'm just getting everything pulled up. So did I hear you correctly? We're going to start with class size minimums draft 2.1.
Yeah. Well, that's right. We do need to sort of start from the top because we got into some
Yes, and
content area discussion.
So again, this is an amendment to section 165 of Title 16, the Education Quality Standards section. Previously, I had the whole section in there, and in order to make this a little bit smaller and avoid scrolling so much, I've put the asterisk there for all of the language that remains unchanged. So we're going to jump right to subdivision 9 here, and I will adjust this asterisk when we are looking at the bill and the amendment that you're voting out to be appropriate. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to jump right to subdivision 9. Yesterday, you all talked about using the language in the Montpelier class size policy and modeling some language in here off of that. And so I've done that. But
And this is for, as we sort of struggle with language, to kind of exempt specials and electives and all that.
as I was doing that, I realized that what the language we were all looking at yesterday was specific to 9 through 12.
Yes.
And that the Montpelier policy actually has a whole separate section for K through 8. And with different language and different classes, etc. So the language that you see here, again, I cannot stress this enough. You can change it. Please don't make me say that again. I think this needs your attention again, because I don't think, I have concerns over whether this would work for grades K through 8. And specifically, so the school complies with average class size minimum standards. That language has been in there all along since you've been contemplating this change. The highlighted language represents language I added after your discussion yesterday. So provided, however, that because class size minimums apply to content areas, an individual class may be smaller than the minimum average. As used in the subdivision, content area means a group of courses within the specific licensing endorsement area. That's taken directly from the Montpelier policy, and I believe that's the language based on what I took from your conversation yesterday. You wanted to see some form of it in here. And so I've added the modifier to all of the individual bands of class sizes in all content areas.
Right.
And then I've added this language from the Montpelier policy on page 2, line 3, classes providing CTE, special education, academic support. I have a question about that. Flexible pathways, services to English learners and driver's ed shall be excluded from the minimum requirements.
Okay.
But that's really a lot of, so special education and academic support and services to English learners are certainly going to be taking place in K through 8.
Mm-hmm.
But CTE, flexible pathways and driver's education is not. The Montpelier policy had a whole separate set of classes that were excluded, types of classes that were excluded from the class size minimums, for that particular grade band. And I don't think you contemplated that yesterday in your discussion. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and say, I'm not sure. I think it would be an open question for you all to decide whether this language, as I have it in draft 2.1, would work for K through 12 inclusive.
Can I ask another question? Just in thinking about things that we may not have considered, maybe we did and I just don't know this, is there any consideration for how many kids in these classes would be on IEPs or 504s, which might make it so that you wanted less total students in that classroom because of the amount of resources that we need to allocate for those situations?
I would say I don't think this accounts for that specific of a circumstance.
It happens all the time.
Josh?
My thought
All
would
the
be
time.
because full inclusion, the class size wouldn't change, but you might have a second adult.
Okay,
The size of the
If you have
number
a
of
para
students
or
would
some
be
sort
the
of aid in
same,
there.
but there might be groupings. within
Right.
it.
but I
So
think,
some of these factors are, pretty highly specific. And if they were unable to meet their class size minimum as a result of it, we have a process where that can be explained and be
Okay.
waived.
okay.
Josh?
Back to Beth's question about, and correct me if I'm wrong, should this be left as a general statement that the K through 12 blankets, or do you break it up into separate sections? Is that kind of the question you're asking?
If that is how you perceived it, great.
Um,
I'm saying, I think this area, I think your conversation yesterday was about language that only applied to grades 9 through 12.
Right.
And I did not understand your conversation to be in that context. I understood your conversation to be thinking about the content area grouping as applicable to all of your grade bands. And so I'm suggesting you go back and look at that policy to see how it's applied and then decide whether this language works for you.
Because I do think that as it is, right, there are some things that will apply to lower grades and some things that will automatically only apply to upper grades. So I do think actually having it as a more broad brush across all grade levels would be adequate, as well as if there's any expansion of these into lower grade levels, it will allow us not to have to go back and recreate everything. We already have the verbiage in statute in case we are able to move electives or CTE comes up with some kind of course that does flow into the middle school grades. I think it would be better to open up this broad.
I just want to return to what Leanne said, because what I heard you say was that was pretty specific. I think I heard that word specific. It's not specific, it's the norm. That's what we have in these high school classes. It's what we have in Algebra 1. It's what we have in 9th grade language arts class. That's what we have, which is why I don't like the numbers that we came up with, and I'm still at the 12, 15, 18 numbers, because it's the norm. 20 kids in a class, if we set that as the minimum, we're looking at 7 to 8 kids on 504s and IEPs with one teacher teaching Algebra 1. And I don't think that's a good idea, and I just want that to be on the record.
And it's complicated. So I might need a little help from people who understand on the committee specific licensing endorsement areas.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, that may be an issue in, because K to 6, it's not as specific, or K 10, because you can have a 5-9 license. An elementary license is not specific to content area. But you can get a 5 to 9 license that is specific to content area, or a 7-12 that's specific. to content area.
So let's say somebody on the floor asks what this means. Who here can answer that question?
Well, what means?
What's the question?
So as used in the subdivision, content area means a group of courses within a specific licensing endorsement area. I don't understand what that means. Could you please explain it to me? Madam Speaker,
Content area only applies to
More for high
5 through
is that a
12, and it's
limited,
varying in those grade levels.
is that a limited, like are there only 5 content areas?
There's
I'd
a
have to
bunch of
look on-
content
You
areas.
have to look at them.
Music would be a content area,
Okay,
so it's broader than 5. for
Right.
sure.
Yeah,
For some of them, it is.
so what happened, so what we were saying here then is that math is a content area, right? Not,
Yes.
Yes, and
not algebra with statistics.
yeah.
Correct.
Right.
It's like any department, including like even theater is its own content, PE, art, music.
So what we're saying here is that math at the high school level is a content area with a specific licensing endorsement,
Mhm.
and that across math, the class size minimum applies. Even though you could have 7 in statistics, in AP statistics, and 25 in algebra 1.
yeah, I was actually thinking maybe rather than having it say in all content areas, that we actually should zero in on the fact that when kids are in grades 9 through 12, they're earning proficiency status towards graduation. And so some of those classes that are taught in math are for graduation, and others are those electives that we started using that language yesterday, like AP Stat.
So that would be, we would make this specific to 9 through 12. And make it like, content area classes required for graduation. What should we do? I totally
Yeah.
understand that. Yes, Beth.
So, yeah, for me, the yellow added in all content areas doesn't seem, to me anyway, to make sense for kindergarten and grades 1 through 4. Maybe starting in grade 5, because that's when you may, but
We
there
can
isn't
look for
really,
9 through 12 if we want.
because you, well, your middle
Well, the-
schools might go by content area, starting in
Do
grade
middle
5.
schools typically have small enrolled electives?
Not electives, but.
Specials.
There's
Content.
They call them something else. They call them
Yeah.
specials.
Yeah.
wind block or.
Well, I think what you're asking though is like, so in 5th grade is when my son starts going to other teachers throughout the day versus K through 4, you stay with one teacher and the teacher, and it may work different at other schools. This is my son's school. K through 4, just one teacher teaches every subject.
Right, and then,
Except
and then grade
specials.
5, you might go to language arts here
And then you switch classrooms and there's the science teacher, et cetera.
Mhm.
And that doesn't count for math and music. That's always a special in all grades.
I'm gonna once again.
I'm sorry, art and music,
It's
not
just-
math.
I'm gonna say once again, I think that it might need to have a broad brush, because in our schools, like, so, 4th grade, right? They go to a math class. 3rd grade, they go to a math class, they go to a ELA class, they go to a science class. Each
Yeah.
teacher teaches their individual subjects at our elementary schools. Right, so your elementary school is kind of how I did it when I was a kid, was the teacher taught everything until they were at a certain grade.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So I think again, that broad brush,
Mhm.
maybe add the words that I think Peter might like is where applicable, right? Because then that will, the schools that do it one way and then you have schools that do it another way, until there is a curriculum change or something like that, which I think might come later with governance and decisions and rules around as we grow this, right? So I think that's where, having it have a little broader brush helps down the road, as well as schools that are different now.
I guess I'm not feeling like the right person to look to leadership through this topic.
There are a lot of licensure areas.
Yeah,
I just,
And I'm just pulling it all up. It's
I don't know
like,
what the kids are in the wording, but I think we're getting way too specific.
we are.
probably.
I worry about getting a little too specific as
Yeah,
well.
even in the weeds.
Especially given the sort of easy or sort of the pathway to rectifying or explaining why you are below the average. Aaron, as a teacher and somebody who's looked at the Montpelier policy pretty well, what do you think about the language that we have in terms of it's sort of applying to all? As opposed to just high school.
Well, Montpelier, I believe, if I'm reading it correctly, starts to deal with sort of content area at grade 5, like you're saying. Beth.
Yeah. And I don't know. if
So if we just left it broad, if we didn't start it at grade 5, it would really have an impact.
Started at 9 to 12, you mean? Go back
No,
to
just-
that, or
just- Use it as is, if you don't really have content area.
I might have been wrong, actually. Now that I think about it, they might start switching it fourth. So, I mean, I don't know that it, yeah.
Okay. I don't think it hurts to have it in there. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'm trying to think what the issue would be if I was a first grade, you know, if this was written this way, what angst does it develop for your elementary school, or is it, yeah, okay.
Why would
You're in the
the-
room all day anyway, so it's fine.
I think we could easily strike out the content area stuff for both kindergarten and grades 1 to 4 for starters. When someone's talking about a first grade class, I think everybody kind of has an understanding of what that looks like.
Middle grade's license.
It has nothing to do with specials. It has to do with whoever your first grade teacher is.
So
Middle
you're
grade is
saying,
5-9.
you're saying the average class size minimum for kindergarten classes should say shall be 12 students.
Shall be 12 students.
Okay. And 1 through 4 shall be 15.
Sure.
Okay.
And then I would start thinking about,
So you would say for grades 5 through 12.
In all content areas.
Um,
I would keep it broken up. I think, I don't know what you do in 5 through 8. I don't really care, but I think maybe in 9 through 12, we should start talking about what you need
Content
for
areas.
graduation as opposed to,
Oh,
Middle grades is 5-9. Just
So like
endorse- the
the
endorsement.
endorsement. Right.
uh,
just when we thought we had the way to work it all out, get ourselves tied up in knots.
can we get another extension on the date?
Thanks,
This is all due?
That's what we got to go.
I said, I'm okay either way, stripping it for K and 1 to 4, or leave, I don't think it's a problem if it's left in. I think it's gonna.
Just to have that,
There isn't.
starting in fifth
There's
grade.
sometimes as if they teach groups.
So I tend to view much of this through the lens of, can I explain this on the floor?
Yeah.
And that's not, I'm not saying that that's what we should do policy, but that's also the back of my mind.
So what I'm hearing is remove on line 15 and 16 in all content areas. And remove on line 17 and 18 in all content areas. Keep in all content areas on lines 19 and 20 and 21 and 22. And then I would modify on line 11, it would say, instead of provided however that because, would say provided however, if class size minimum apply to content areas. The individual class may be smaller than the minimum average. Is that
I think so, yeah.
If, instead of that, because, put in more if.
right? Because, K through 4 will no longer be related to content areas. So the way that would work is the average class size minimum for kindergarten classes would be 12 students, full stop.
Right.
And that the average class size minimum for grades 1 through 4 would be 15 students, full stop.
Yes.
But for grades 5 through 12, it would be the minimum class size across content areas, and therefore individual class sizes could be smaller.
You just can't say if, it needs to say when or something to that effect, because if makes it sound like it's optional.
Understood.
Just language that I did pick up. Okay, well, all that matters.
The other piece I would just call your attention to is lines 3 through 5 on page 2. This is really only going to be applicable, half of this is going to be applicable to all grades. Half of this is really only going to be applicable to high school. And if you're good with that, awesome. But if there are specialties or whatever label we put on it for non-high school grades that should be included here as part of the exclusion, I just want to bring that to your attention. I also am concerned about this term academic support,
Yeah,
because my understanding of MTSS is there should be academic support being provided on certain tiers in the general education classrooms anyway.
Yeah.
So this could be seen as,
the
You
language
could
that,
apply to so much.
right,
the language VSA gave us that maybe is more precise is intervention services pursuant to Act 173.
There you go.
we can't refer to Act 173. I think that if I have your permission, I can reach out to the VSA and
Please. I don't think Chelsea, it's not.
and just make sure that we have the same understanding of what that means. To me, that is referring to MTSS,
Yes.
but that may not be their intent, and I'm not in the field, so I may not have the best understanding of what that is.
So instead of academics, oh, sorry. It really is about the academic intervention.
Yeah. Instead
And
of
I'm looking at that
services.
list and the only thing I see there that doesn't drop below grade 9 is driver ed. Everything else on that list is relevant to K-8, so I'm fine having it apply to everybody.
I don't think CTE is.
Yeah,
It is in middle school.
There could be
It's
some
not
It is middle
reason.
CTE, but it is,
Which,
An endorsement area.
and they are trying to move more of those opportunities into middle school. in
An
the future.
endorsement is. Yeah, for that.
What about flexible pathways?
They do personal learning plans starting, flexible path, I guess I'm thinking that as a PLP. They start that in grade 7.
You can be fine with this. This is all policy for you. I just wanted to highlight that this language is taken
Yep.
as applicable only to grades 9 through 12 in the source you were looking at.
Yeah.
And Vermont had your policy. What we would probably think of as specials are also excluded for 5 through 8. I'm not sure if that's a practicality about their district and
and they use the term specials.
no, art, music, PE, health, family, consumer science.
Those are licensed content areas.
I believe they all require an endorsement.
Would you read that list again?
Art, music, PE, health, family and consumer science, and tech ed are excluded from those guidelines.
I think I would be leaning toward not getting that specific. Again, given the ability to explain yourself through a long process of support and technical assistance. All right, so just to put a bow on lines 3 through 5, we're gonna take out the words academic support.
Something else.
And put in intervention. So that's-
Question about flexible pathways.
Well, you can't just take it out without putting something back in, right?
Which one?
Well,
Academic
Rob,
support.
Yeah, I think that intervention, whatever, that, however Beth phrased it.
that's what brought that up.
My understanding is that I have permission to talk with the
Yes.
Superintendent's
Oh, okay.
Association to make sure that I get the academic intervention language
Right.
correct.
Right.
The does this language give us one of the challenges we know on the ground? And I hope this committee continues to dive into, maybe even like next week, we get through this, is the way early college is playing out in some places and decimating junior and particularly senior classes. And so classes providing flexible pathways, it's also, I don't know if that gets at the challenge of, say, a school where a lot of the seniors go to early college. And so then they can offer fewer and fewer things. It's almost in like the counting of students who go to early college. I don't want to get us too tied up in this, but this is a real problem.
So,
Trying to figure out if that covers what we are intending for flexible pathways and this kind of early college unintended consequence thing that's happening in the field.
Yeah.
I might put so I think flexible pathways is to not complicate those who might be doing dual enrollment or whatever,
Right.
and they're in a 5-person math course at Norwich.
I can
Um,
wordsmith this to make it read cleaner and not include.
But you're bringing up a separate issue, which is we're also, if we're putting class size minimums on schools, some of whom are really hit hard by early college. And I think I would go back to my refrain of that can be explained if you're arguing your class size minimums fairly effectively.
Right, because that can really fluctuate here, depending on the group.
Also, putting that into words, I
I
think
know.
are
I
challenging.
don't know, what were you gonna offer something, Beth, that was?
Well, it depends on what your goal here is. Is it classes affected by flexible pathways? I guess maybe I don't have enough direction to provide some wordsmithing, but I see what your point about classes providing flexible pathways doesn't really make sense.
It's not, yeah, it's essentially kids some of it is kids you're losing. Because of flexible pathways that's then impacting.
But remember, flexible pathways also includes, well, virtual learning.
Right, no, it's only some of
Yeah.
that, that's the hard part.
So how do we squeeze that in?
Well,
I mean, with their other thing for us all to consider, policy committee here is this, we're gonna get into all the date stuff, but if this is sort of going into place July 1, 2026, all the more pressure on us to address the early college issue before that, this year or next year. I don't love that. I'm just putting it out there that that's also like real power that we have and need to maybe use.
I still think we need to do some work distinguishing between content area classes in grades 9 through 12 and elective classes in grades 9 through 12.
Page 1.
Page 1.
suggestions?
What are you thinking?
I sort of put it out there with the difference between what's necessary for meeting
Oh,
graduation requirements and what isn't.
Right.
Another way we could do it is. No, I think that's probably a better way to do it.
Would it be possible to create one more subsection when we go over minimums and instead of grades 9 through 12, do grades 9 through 10 and grades 11 through 12, since these are vastly different experiences? And go lower on 11 through 12 because they have so many competing institutions? I know that that's starting,
Yeah.
it's going backwards.
I would not, I would not want to go down that road. Moment. So Kate, what you're saying is that as used in this subdivision, well, I'm not quite sure how to word it.
What I'm saying
totally
is,
understanding your point.
our
Trying to-
geometry classes, 20 kids,
Right.
great, love it. But as you get further up and you get to maybe AP pre-calc or calculus class, we're not gonna have necessarily 20 in there, and it really shouldn't be counting against us. We need to offer those courses, like, we'd be doing kids a disservice if we were not offering those courses.
Right, but isn't this the average though?
But still, that
All
average, if you're
content area.
sitting at 20
Yeah,
for your algebra 1, geometry, whatever,
right.
and then you average in these things that are
13,
lower,
right,
you're gonna go
AP
below
calc.
20 right away.
Right,
My guess is that
Which was the AP.
schools are gonna try to hold at 20,
right,
because we're setting minimums that used to be our maximums.
right.
So schools aren't going to want to push the limit any higher than 20, especially given what Leanne was talking about with all the
Right,
kids
right,
that
right.
are on plans that are in those classes anyway.
So what happens to AP Calc if only 13 kids sign up?
When you average
run
in
it?
something that's below 20 with a bunch of 20s,
We
you
don't
get
run it.
something below
Our-
20.
Our use of sort of specific licensing content or areas was an attempt to address this, it seems. It may not be working. I understand everything you're saying and agree. So do we go back to a word like, electives at the high school level are exempt?
I think that can get tricky.
Josh?
Or do you, instead of saying exempt, you put a minimum there too, but obviously a lower minimum, right? Like, seems
I think our challenge is like defining elective as opposed to,
Can I add something?
yeah, please.
This is all policy choice. But you
We're not
started,
very good at policy choices, it appears.
you started with none of the highlighted language. It just says class size minimums. And then you listed out these subcategories. And then you had the state board go in and do the debate that you're having right now
Right.
to amend the EQS to provide all of the nitty gritty exceptions, guidance, definitions, etc. I'm just throwing that out there as a policy option.
Great policy option. Going through a timing thing in my head. This would kick in 2026. That would give the state board essentially a year to do that sort of debate. What do people think about that? Josh?
I'm not a fan of kicking the can. So could you put in the section where it says classes providing career tech notification, et cetera, put in electives, right, the generic term as defined by the Board of Education, right? So we still,
That you're accomplishing the same thing as.
right, but instead of having them redo everything, like we still do all the things we're doing here. We don't take out all the yellow text. We just add that section, so they just have to define what that is for this purpose.
We have to also then charge them with, doing that.
Right, but I'm saying, right, we were just talking about charging with doing everything that's in yellow. We just simplified. I think that's our sticking point with that one.
Seems like we accomplish the same thing.
I'm just, and I could be wrong, getting in the weeds again because there is the waiver process. I mean, are we trying to get too specific and handle everything in this section? As opposed to if there's a school for 2 years, high school's not making it, it's because so many kids are being pulled for early college, CTE, et cetera, and they make that case to the state board and they're like, yeah, we get it, you're fine.
I think we have to be careful
I don't know.
about assume, I hear you.
Yeah.
But if we're setting up a process of like every school's schedule is essentially getting vetted by the state board.
Yeah.
Okay.
We want
Failed. I just think like that, we're looking for consistency and
Yeah.
stability. If we think sort of like somebody else figuring out all the exceptions, I think that's a like worst case, or we should think of that as a small, not like the sort of first answer to all of these questions that we have to deal with the
Okay.
authority by now. But
Good
I would, yes, they will be better equipped to do it. But
Although if we say,
there's- I worry.
the huge chunk of classes in the middle, which kids are taking for graduation, right? All the basic classes, right? If we say, as a clause in here, electives that may not count towards graduation requirements are exempt.
They might, you know.
They might, yeah, that's the thing. Like I know at our school, we offer a bunch of different English courses. Journalism, creative writing, right? They all can count towards graduation because, right? So what did I say? That may not count towards.
But when you get to British authors,
Right. Right.
maybe they've already reached their graduation
I was
requirements. by
thinking that
then.
too, like they're just taking an extra because they're
Because they
one of
want
the nerds, or right, they're doing the AP Calc and they've got their math requirements. So yeah, I'm trying to sift this out so that there might be a way to do it without kicking it down the street.
Or we can go with Josh's plan of just letting the state board define electives and say some high school electives may be exempt, some non-curricular electives may be exempt from class size minimums.
Can we just put it in 6?
It's the, I think the definition of electives that we,
Right.
all right, we gotta dig ourselves out of this hole, people.
Yeah, because we have more.
This won't dig us out at all, but this is the challenge that we're facing, is that like what the things we're working on and deciding on are hard trade-offs of like, we want efficiency, bend the cost curve, bigger classes. In some cases, perhaps some more than we realize, it also might mean less opportunity. Like this is what the outside world is probably thinking and seeing as they watch this. So just, our sort of magical thinking of like, this is gonna mean every high school kid's gonna have so much money, more opportunities. I think there is some of that, but like the bigger scale stuff. There's also like, these are hard realities in a small state, small schools that could mean fewer opportunities too, and we shouldn't be naive to that. Unfortunately,
So I would,
that's not helpful.
well, it's helpful.
I-
What you're trying to say is,
Can-
let's just keep it as.
Not helpful.
the way we have it. Yeah, Leanne and.
So, our high school is adjacent to one of those historic academies, and without these class size minimums, they could offer a ton of more additional opportunities for juniors and
Yeah.
seniors. And this is exactly what we are seeing is our juniors and seniors leaving for like St. J Academy because there are more offerings there. And so that's what we would be doing is we would essentially be putting the nail in the coffin of 11th and 12th grade classes. I'm gonna say English because that's my area, but
How are they
Can I,
going there without paying for it?
Can
so- some of them are paying for it and some of them live in towns like Walden is
Have choice.
one.
can I just add to that? Because I hear exactly what you're saying. It is literally a matter of privilege. And I'm concerned about it. I mean, if we go there, those who can opt to go to a school with more choices will, and those who cannot won't. And that's where I'm gonna always drop.
And then that's gonna make the whole class size even harder to achieve because you get less and less kids. I mean, it's like,
I think, well, first of all, you can't stop rich people from paying to go to school wherever they want to go to school.
no, I'm not trying to suggest we do, but.
But related, this isn't in
Because
the
they
language
always
in
will.
front of us right now, but related to something that was surfaced yesterday and I think is on our to-do list is then to where do class size minimums and all of this that we are tied in knots over apply? And a good reminder of why we have to be sure that we are applying it equitably and thoughtfully, i.e. to schools that receive public dollars, so that we are not creating alternate incentives or just really kids who have the least options.
Josh?
So like, kind of thinking through a case a little bit, like what, so what kind of elective courses that students can choose to take outside of the required core curriculums, right? That can define electives. Then we have to define what core curriculum, which I think is going to be easier than the other way around. Right, so we then simplify it the other way and just define what core curriculum is. So whether it be courses that are, required for graduation or are, addressed like are assessed through state or federal testing. I don't know, like there's a way, I think it's easier to define core curriculum than it is to define all of the electives, right? So simplify the electives definition and get more granular on the core curriculum definition.
Which I think is similar to what Kate said.
Yeah, that's right. I gave her the credit first before I said it.
Okay.
I just want to add that voters told us that they pay too much in property taxes. And they did not say, blow up our schools and offer fewer enriching classes for their kids.
I also think.
So any decisions that we are making here better reflect that.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with that is to control property taxes. That's largely driven by education spending.
I think on that note, in addition to that, the piece that's missing is that we are also paying a lot for education, but we're not getting the return on investment that we've been looking for.
Yeah, we're not getting that today right now.
I know,
We're
I'm
gonna-
saying there's
we're
two
gonna-
sides to that same
We're
thing.
gonna get back to getting through class size minimums. Thoughts? Look at me.
What should we do?
Don't look at Peter.
Aaron.
I would leave it in the fairly general way we have it now. I think as Beth is already planning to do, we have to unpack the academic support piece, interventionist. And at this moment, until I think of the next problem, I would leave it there. And then ask that one of the next things we go to is, are we applying this in all schools that receive for student and public dollars regardless of whether. That will be the next, to follow up on that, but I think I am, at this moment, sort of leave it as we have it in a pretty broad thing. I'm worried about the graduation piece, unless there's a place to tie. We're also talking about statewide graduation standards. So, graduation standards are different everywhere, which is another complicating factor to this. So later in another section of the bill, we're gonna ask the state board or tell the state board, right, to give us uniform graduation standards across the state. So do these two connect to each other, speak to each other? Is that gonna be obvious in the state board's work? Is that something we have to say here?
Leanne?
What if we added in all required content area classes as the language? Because like 9th and 10th are generally, at least from my experience, required.
Yes.
And then you don't get to choose which 10th grade English. That's the last year that you're with all your 10th graders. And then the sort of subpaths begin. So if you just added that word required in all content area classes, that would allow arguably for those electives without having to define electives to exist.
Let's go with that for the time being.
It's gonna
So you
mean
would
different
like-
things in different places, but yeah.
So we're gonna get rid of in all content areas on lines 15 and 16. Get rid of in all content areas on lines 17 and 18, and then where am I adding this new language?
Up above,
You mean for grade 5 through 8? or
Provided,
9 through
however,
12
that when
versus-
class size minimums apply to content areas.
I think what you said, required content area classes.
Yeah, like on lines 21 and 22, the average class size minimum for grades 9 through 12 in all content, required content area classes.
So just 19 and 20?
Does it, I mean, unless it needs to be somewhere else too.
21,
No, I'm
22.
asking because
Yeah,
This
because you
is the
want
policy.
clear, you want
Yeah.
clear, unambiguous guidance.
yeah.
Oh, that would be, yeah, 21, 22, right?
So I'll add a monkey wrench. So if we're not gonna add it, because the only other place we're keeping the content area piece is 19 and 20. I would rather either not have it there at all or have it the same thing, because then we have 3 different sort of things going on. And maybe we don't need in all content areas in grades 5 through 8 either. Maybe it is
Just.
just
18,
that,
yes.
or you make it say exactly the same thing as the 9 through 12 one, just for consistency.
Which would have been easier.
Thoughts? I put the,
PSA one.
what's that?
Adding it to both?
That's what I thought we were
Either put it in
about.
both or.
No, in fact, what you're arguing is not both, just the last.
Only, no, Leanne was saying just in 21 and 22. So I'm saying either we also put it in 19 and 20, or we just make 19 and 20 look like all the ones above.
No, let's go 19 through 22.
Looking like the ones above?
No, I mean,
Adding
required
the word
content
required.
area classes.
Because there could be middle schools that do have some electives depending on your school, so. I'm happy with that.
Yep.
Consistent.
She scores for the new one. And so. Okay, maybe we'll take the win and head to the floor